Hey everyone, Paulo here. Let's just jump right into it and see if how YouTube responds to this. All right, Savannah Hernandez reports. So we have this Savannah Hernandez for the Postmillennial here, written a story for the Postmillennial. The WEF uses fear, so the World Economic Forum, of a climate catastrophe to control people and restrict their rights. During this year's 2023 WEF meeting in Davos, mass extinction, planetary crisis, and the narrative of billions of people being displaced globally as a direct result of carbon emissions took center stage. So this is a 4-minute read. Okay. On its face, the World Economic Forum is branded as an organization committed to improving the state of the world. However, year after year, the same organization uses scare tactics and propaganda to convince people to give up their rights and freedoms in the name of global safety. For the past 2 years, fear surrounding the COVID virus, resulting in restrictions on populations around the world, and the push for a global digital vaccine passport have been at the forefront of the World Economic Forum. Yet, as the fear around the virus subsides, the WEF has returned to their original focus and their narrative surrounding the climate crisis. But they did push some of the universal vax stuff, like Tony Blair, I think, was talking about having a universal global system to register people and their vaccination status. During this year's 2023 WEF meeting in Davos, mass extinction. Did I not just read that? I think that was up here. That same statement that's up here. Okay. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres took to the stage to warn of impending climate disaster, sharing that fossil fuel producers need to be held to account and that these business models are inconsistent with human survival. Shutting off the power is inconsistent with human survival. He compared the fossil fuel industry to the tobacco industry, oh my gosh, without once noting that it was the emergence of the prevalence of cheap available fossil fuels that enabled more people to rise out of poverty globally than ever before. Scientifically, this is not a climate crisis, Swiss scientist Johann Rockström stated during his WEF panel. We are now facing something deeper, mass extinction. He finished by stating that we are really putting humanity's future at risk. Oh my gosh. His fellow speaker then went on to bash greenhouse gas emissions, sharing that by 2070, as many as 3 billion people will eventually be displaced or live in uninhabitable zones, calling this a justice crisis. However, a quick look at the history of climate change paints a very different picture. I joined Charlie Kirk's show to discuss how censorship and climate fear propaganda have been used throughout the decades to keep the masses ignorant and afraid of mass extinction tied to climate change. For example, back in the 1970s, global cooling was a major concern with warnings of an impending ice age from climate scientists and the mainstream media. In 1974, Time magazine wrote a headline, "Another Ice Age, pushing the narrative of global cooling." Then we jumped to the 80s, where the narrative shifted to global warming. The New York Times wrote the headline, "Temperature for World Rises Sharply by the 1980s," stating that average global temperatures in the 1980s are the highest measured since reliable records were kept over 130 years ago. Finally, if we jump to the modern day, so were they? Were they the highest? Why is this left unresolved? Come on, Savannah. Why is that left unresolved? Finally, if we jump to the modern day, we see the phrasing evolve from global warming to the much more versatile climate change. Alongside this phrase come other fear-inducing buzzwords such as mass extinction and climate justice. Sadly, fear has been used for decades to scare generations into accepting unreliable and expensive forms of green energy, such as solar and wind. A quick search will show the large impact that these forms of energy also have on the environment, which is very true. The elements that you need to create these things, like all the rare earth metals and stuff, to mass produce the amount of energy we would need, we would have to mine so much. It would be way worse for the environment than mining. But hey, that happens in Africa, and I guess maybe that's why they want to do it. I don't know. Another talking point used by promoters of green energy used by promoters of green energy is how the impoverished third world will be most impacted by climate change. And it is only through the adoption of net zero policies, just like net zero COVID, right? Like that was a ridiculous policy. And lower carbon emissions that we can save these areas. These types of arguments are what have led us to the ban on sale of new gas vehicles in the EU and California by 2035. However, overlooked are the environmental impact of cobalt mining to create the batteries for electric vehicles. Earth.org reports that mineral mining, similar to other industrial mining efforts, often produces pollution that leaches into neighboring rivers. Oh, she just copied that from Earth.org. I was like, why are we spelling this like we're English? All right. Into neighboring rivers and water sources. Dust from pulverized rock is known to cause breathing problems for local communities as well. Also overlooked are the benefits of bringing a cost-effective and easily transportable fuel supply to third world nations. Alex Epstein. I see this guy all over Twitter. I have a bookmark of, he's got like a cliff notes of his book. I don't know. A lot of his arguments, I don't actually see any support for. He just writes things down and I don't actually see anything. I'm not a big fan of him. I don't really think he adds much to the conversation personally. But let's see what she quotes here from the book Fossil Future. The tragedy of babies dying for lack of the energy needed to power ultrasound machines and incubators occurs every day in many parts of the world without affordable, reliable energy. Thankfully, it is a tragedy that happens less and less frequently than it used to because billions of people in developing countries like China and India have used fossil fuels to provide affordable, reliable energy. No matter what form of energy we use, there will be some environmental impact in some way, shape, or form, and the complete disregard of the benefits of fossil fuels has skyrocketed energy prices and led to an entire generation fearful of its use. This is true. I do agree with that. This use of fear to control our energy supply is one of the main reasons people don't trust the WEF or its leaders, especially when they're utilizing the same private jets, gas vehicles, and diets they pretend to rail against. Yeah. What did we see? We saw Glasgow? A school in Glasgow or all of Glasgow made some commitment to be meat-free in schools. Some weird nonsense like that, which is like a WEF thing, eat the bugs, live in the pods. Anyways, this is interesting. It doesn't really, one problem I have, especially with like Alex Epstein, is there's no discussion of replacing fossil fuels because no matter what, at the end of the day, fossil fuels are limited, right? There's no replacing them once they're burned. So no matter what, at the end of the day, there needs to be science going on to get us off fossil fuels. Is that nuclear? Is it fusion? Like, I don't know, right? So France is building a big fusion reactor. I don't really have any hope for it. I don't think that's like going to be a very successful project for them. But there is a company that there is a great documentary from, I think it's called Real Engineering on YouTube, where he went to a company that's trying a different method for doing nuclear fusion, which looked really interesting. And Who knows? Maybe we are only 10, 15 years away from something like that. But anyways, this is an interesting article. I don't like the fact that the 1980s thing was left unanswered, and like the quote is really good for why we shouldn't just go away from fossil fuels altogether, and why we're never going to convince China not to use fossil fuels, India not to use fossil fuels, Africa not to use fossil fuels. We're never going to convince them not to do that. But it doesn't address what we should be doing. And I think that's a big problem. We do need to address what we should be doing. Anyways, thank you for joining me. If you like, please like, comment, subscribe below. Let me know what you do like. Let me know what you don't like. Let me know what else you'd like me to cover. Thank you for joining me. Have a wonderful day.